Right, so here we are this morning with Jakko Jakszyk, and Jakko, there's a Crimson tour which is kicking off in the very, very near future. 10 dates, I believe, starting in the spiritual home of Crimson in Bournemouth and going on through till Edinburgh. So I suppose the first thing to ask before we dig a bit deeper is what can we expect from this tour compared to the one that was about 3 years ago?
Well, we've added quite a lot more to the repertoire. So each time we get together, and we've been touring in kind of 2 blocks per year, and in each block we've been adding 2 to 3 tunes each time. So there's since we last played in England, well, my basic math is appalling, obviously. So that's what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's about 10, possibly 12 new additional pieces to the repertoire. But I can't guarantee what people will hear because Robert changes the set every night, and he chooses from what is now 45 pieces, I think.
So going into that, in terms of rehearsing for the tour, do you have a template you work to and all 45 pieces, or do you expect you just to improvise around the kind of that known repertoire?
No, I mean there's a kind of the bulk of what we did the previous year, and then when we add stuff, the rehearsals are quite detailed. We work stuff out. Quite often Gavin and I will do some demos if there are older pieces. We'll kind of do demos so it enables people to practice before they get here, because obviously the mere act of getting everybody together in one country is a costly, time-consuming enterprise, because there's 3 guys that live in different parts of the States, and we have to ship them over. So the idea of doing demos means that they've got their own little kind of multi-track, so they can play along to the pieces with or without the part that they'll be playing. And then we get together, Robert and I, and sometimes the keyboard guys will all get together in a room and rehearse for a few days, and the drummers will get together for a week and go through the parts that Gavin will have written and arranged. And we do all that before we even get together as a full lineup,
Okay, and in terms of lineup, there was this original idea of having a double quartet, but I believe that now it's fixed on a 7-piece for this tour.
No, it's 8-piece. Bill, who's been coming in and out of the band, has come back this year, and so he plays additional keys and colorings and atmospheres and that kind of thing. And then Jeremy is playing drums, and he plays keys too, but largely piano. He's a very good piano player, Jeremy. So it's 8 of us.
Okay, and apart from that, it's the lineup that came to, I think London was Hackney Empire about 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's the same lineup plus Jeremy. So Jeremy's kind of replaced Bill. And then Bill has kind of come back as a kind of, as a kind of colorist and keyboard player.
And I mean, looking at your history with the music of King Crimson, it goes back quite some way. But I think some people forget that you didn't formally join the band until only a few years ago.
2013, yeah. But I'd been on the periphery, because there was a band when was it? 97, I think, when Robert released a box set called Epitaph of live recordings by the original lineup from '69. And I'd got to know Pete Sinfield, so I was invited to that, and out of that came this thing called the Schizoid Band, which was former members of Crimson playing the older material that the then current version of Crimson didn't touch. So ironically, I was the only guy in the band that hadn't been in King Crimson. So I toured with them for a few years. So obviously I played a lot of that older material and sang it and played Robert's parts. And then it was as a result of that really that I got to know Robert, because he he phoned me up completely out of the blue at the end of a rehearsal period with a schizoid band, and asked me how it was going. And I told him it was the most unpleasant 3 weeks of my life as a musician, and he was very supportive. So that's how I got to know him, really. And then he played on my solo record that I made, and then I forget the chronology, but then Ian Wallace, who replaced Mike Giles, both in King Crimson and the Schizoid Band, Ian tragically died, and I sang, accompanied by Mel, I sang Islands, the title track of the album, the studio album that Ian had been on. I sang that at his funeral, and Robert was there, and we got chatting, and then Robert asked me up to do some improvising. We spent a couple of days improvising, and that eventually turned into an album called A Scarcity of Miracles, which was kind of, I guess, where the basis of this current lineup of Crimson started, because that was Mel Collins, Robert, myself, and Tony Levin and Gavin Harrison on drums.
Because if I'm correct on this, that's the only full album studio album you've appeared on, or the last one I think, which was kind of that compilation, that live compilation. You're on that as well.
Well, we've released quite a lot of live stuff since this version of the band's been out, and as I speak, I think next week is a release of this thing called Meltdown, which is a Blu-ray of recorded and filmed performances of us playing last year in Mexico City. We did a theatre called the Metropole, which looks very similar in both look and size to Hammersmith Odeon, as I insist on calling it.
Of course.
So it's kind of Mexico City's answer to Hammersmith Odeon. We sold out 5 nights there last summer. And that's about to come out next week, I think.
So is there kind of a sense of anticipation that there will be a full studio project, or in the current sort of record industry climate is kind of the plan forward, to do live recordings and then discrete songs?
I mean, these decisions are not made by me, but whilst there's no plan to make a studio record, there isn't a plan not to, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And there's certainly enough material. We've in the current repertoire, there's more than 40 minutes worth of new material that we've written, and there's other kind of demos of stuff I've done with Robert or on my own that's yet to make it to the rehearsal room. So that there's lots of new material, but yeah, you're right. The industry's changed. Historically, you toured to promote a record, and that's kind of on its head now. Sorry about that ringing. So yeah, you're touring for the sake of it, and sometimes if you put a new record out, it's almost like a memento of the tour rather than the reason why you're touring. And obviously, getting a lineup of this size and complexity into a studio, there's a limited there's limited places where we could do that. So it's not been ruled out. It's just not been kind of specifically ruled in at this moment.
And from looking at the publicity for it, the tour's entitled "Uncertain Times."
Yeah.
What does that reflect?
Well, it reflects. We spent 3-4 months in America last year, and I can't speak for Robert, but you definitely got the sense of the divisive nature of what's happening politically there, and I have relatives right in the middle of America, and so I see the attitudes quite starkly about and something similar has happened too here in England as part of Brexit. It's there's a kind of ugly underbelly of political stuff that has come to the surface. I think it's been legitimised, you know, and you know, we sent some terrible kind of divisive stuff in the States, and as I say, some of the stuff I've seen my family write is really unpalatable, and but it's as if the leaders, you know, Trump and Brexit here, it's given that kind of far right some legitimacy. So people are kind of saying things that they might not have done a few years ago. I had terrible grief here as well when the Brexit vote was finished. I think a day later. I'm not actually Polish. I've got a Polish surname, but I was adopted by a Polish serviceman who ended up in England. And when my adoptive father was old, just before he died, we used to go to this place in Hammersmith called the Polish Centre. I used to take him there for lunch or dinner, and so I have a degree of nostalgia for that location. And 24 hours after the Brexit vote, this place has been there for 60 years or something, and it was longer probably, and it was completely covered in racist graffiti overnight. And on my Facebook page, I linked an article about it in one of the papers, and I just said, I have great memories of that place, and how sad I was. And I posted it up, and I got the usual kind of hundreds of people sympathising, and then people started sharing it, and at that point it kind of gets out of your control,
yes,
and it ends up in a kind of public domain. And for the next 2 weeks, I got unbelievable abuse. I mean, really shocking.
How crazy is that?
Yeah, and it was all of a similar nature. It was, we won, you lost, why don't you F off home? I don't think they meant Croxley Green at the end of the Metropolitan line, which is where I grew up. But and as I say, it's the legitimizing of that kind of thought, and you could see it across the world. So a rather long-winded answer to your simplistic question, I think it refers to that we live in these strange, uncertain times.
And talking about your family, you composed a piece, the Road to Balina, about your sort of retracing your family history to your both your adopted parents and then your birth mother.
Yeah, I was commissioned by the BBC some years ago, and I did this piece using speech as part of the composition. And it has a narrative where we trace the complicated arc of my adoption and upbringing, and we flew my adoptive father back to Poland, and we recorded a lot of the stuff on site, including going to Auschwitz.
Wow.
And both my adoptive father and my adoptive French mother have this incredible tragic tale of their own. Their individual stories are amazing. And then I found my real mother, who was Irish and quite a famous singer in the 40s and 50s. She fronted one of the top two biggest Irish show bands in Ireland. So we went back to Ireland. We went to Balina in Ireland in County Mayo, and the band leader was still alive at that point. So we interviewed lots of people there that knew her. But she ended up in a place called Bearden, Arkansas. It's in the middle of Arkansas there.
And I mean, I when I sort of look back at your career, there's kind of before Crimson and then after Crimson, because you went through numerous collaborations and friendships with people like Gavin and Dave Stewart, and so projects that kind of almost were and then got shelved. Record companies like Chiswick going bust. Was it a relief to finally get on board the Crimson bus?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's the nearest I've had to a day job. Yeah, it's already lasted 5 years, and it's brilliant to be able to do something that's kind of that together and that organised, and is a brilliant platform for whatever else I end up doing. And I'm not blind to the fact that it changes people's perceptions about you. Again, using that word, it gives me a certain legitimacy, which is why I'm sure I ended up you know, because I accidentally ended up being a guy that remixes stuff too, and so the past few years have been incredibly busy. I mean, last year alone was in between the Crimson tours and rehearsals and the preparation and the writing stuff for that. I remixed a load of live stuff for Jethro, Tull. I've done quite a bit of stuff for Ian Anderson, and I did a lot of the stuff on the Heavy Horses box set last year.
Yes.
And I did the first two Bruford albums, and I did the Chris Squire album, Fish Out of Water. And then this year, in fact, I got copies the other day of Search of the Lost Chord by the Moody Blues. So yeah, no, I'm thrilled that all that's happened a lot later than I'd anticipated, but I'm grateful nonetheless to being employed.
And what maybe people aren't aware of is you're in Fleetwood Mac for one night.
Yes, it's not an area of my career I'm overly keen on talking about, but yes, when French and Saunders did a pastiche of Fleetwood Mac, I donned a false beard and pretended to be Lindsey Buckingham.
So, I mean, there's a serious question behind that. When Lindsay left, or has he, Fleetwood Mac, were you expecting the phone to ring, or were you hoping the phone to ring?
Yeah, I had the beard and everything. Got the beard, the white guitar. Can't believe they didn't call me. No, and you know, I was in the Kinks for a week as well. Not as a pastiche, but as in reality. So
the bands you've been in, is there anyone that you would have liked to have stayed in longer? I mean, Level 42 is one that springs to mind that you're in for a while.
Yeah,
but didn't record with.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that. I mean, musically, that wasn't exactly kind of where I'm from, but it was such a fantastic job to do, and by the time I'd joined them, it had kind of become a guitar-featured group, you know, with Al Murphy and then Alan Holdsworth. So I loved doing that job, and you know, playing with the likes of Mike and Mark and Gary Husband, you know, brilliant musicians. It was an incredible job to be able to do, and I loved it. So yeah, I would have loved that to have gone on longer, because it was a joy. But they kind of it all crumbled a bit at the end of '94, and I toured a bit with Mark afterwards on a solo thing with Mark, and indeed Gary Husband again there too. But yeah, no, that would have been nice to have done that a bit longer. I enjoyed that enormously.
And I mean, just one other historical thing, then we'll come back up to present. Is sure. in the period where you were writing songs through a publishing deal, I read that you refused to let Whitney Houston record one of your songs.
Well, at the time, this would have been, I suppose it's the mid to late 80s. I can't pin it down exactly, but I'd started working as a producer, and I was being managed by Peter Collins, very well-known producer. Yes. His wife Debbie was managing him at the time, and so she took me on as a kind of client, and I would get the spoils off of Pete's overfilled table, you know. And so she went on a trip to America where she was seeing various labels, and she went to see Clive Davis, and she played him a showreel of stuff that I'd done. And one of the things on there was, bizarrely, was a song I'd written and produced for a girl called Colleen Nolan, who
good grief.
Who my pal Gavin, who I'm currently in a band with, he was going out with her at the time, and she was toying with the idea of leaving the comfort of the Nolan sisters and breaking out on her own. So I said, well, look, I'll write something for you. So I wrote this song, and we recorded it, and as I say, Deborah Collins was touting this about, and she played some of my stuff to Clive Davis, and he said, I've got to have that song. That song's fantastic. And she phoned me from America. This is pre-internet and pre-mobile phone. And she phoned me and said, you know, Clive Davis wants this song for this new artist they've got. And I said, I couldn't. I said, I wrote it specifically Colleen, and I couldn't possibly do that. What's the name of the artist? And I'd never heard of her. I thought, well, this is I can't do that. So I said no, and it turned out to be Whitney Houston, and Colleen never did leave the Nolans. So more fool me, I say.
And did she? Was there a sort of a final recording that she did of the song, which did it justice?
Well, Colleen?
Yeah.
No, Colleen was great, actually. Much maligned, but I liked her enormously, and she was a very good singer. And the version we did never came out. Bizarrely, they did do it live. That was a very surreal experience, going to watch them live and seeing them do one of my songs. But no, it was never released.
Great stuff. So coming right back to present, you're gearing up for the UK part of the tour.
Yeah, rehearsal starts Sunday.
So how does it work? Does everyone convene down in a manor house in Bournemouth and sit on the lawn like in the old days?
No, we convene to a small theatre next to a which is within a short stroll from a rather nice old manor house turned hotel in Hertfordshire. So we're rehearsing there for a week. We might be adding one thing. I'm not entirely sure. But basically, it's a kind of week get together because we finished the last bunch of touring finished in Venice at the end of July.
Yeah.
So it's just blowing the cobwebs off the repertoire, see if we can remember any of it for a week, and then and as you say, then we head off down to Bournemouth, which is where a lot of Crimson members came from originally. Yeah,
that's right. The Sally Party, John Wetton,
Greg Lake, the Giles brothers. Yeah, they're all from that neck of the woods, and of course Robert is from Wimborne, just up the road.
And I think the great thing is that it's great that the band's touring again, but there's not, I guess, the big amount of sort of anticipation and maybe over expectation when you came back 3 years ago.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah,
less
it's a bit
pressure.
More relaxed. Yeah, and people obviously know a bit more about what this version of the band does or can do, or is prepared to do, or is able to do. And it's great, and as a fanboy myself, I'm amazed at some of the things that we are playing from the history. You know, things that have never been played live ever, as well as along with the new stuff. So we play something. I think apart from one album, I think we play something off every album, apart from one.
Great. And a very final question. Adrian is an unofficial 9th resting member. Does that mean that he's going to pop up, or is it just kind of an honorary position he now has?
Well, I'm not sure. I think that's above my pay grade to answer that particular question. So I have no idea, mate. There's nothing planned to my knowledge.
Yeah, I think that with you as the voice of the band, I can't kind of see how that would fit, and particularly now that you've got the second full series of dates. I think it works best in this configuration. And
this configuration is about a certain approach and a certain thing, and I think one of the things that it's only when you see it live that it becomes fully apparent, but having the drummers down the front and the rest of us kind of surrounding that, it makes the group a much more unconventional kind of egalitarian thing. It's like a mini orchestra, really, and it's as I understand it, it's kind of deliberately done in that way by Robert. So there is no the standard rock and roll lineup is the lead singer down the front and everybody kind of supportive of that, and that's not what this is. I'm the singer, but I'm up the back, and I'm part of the ensemble, and the focus moves depending on who's doing what, And Adrian is is very much a front man kind of guy, So I don't think Adrian would be very comfortable doing this. I don't think it exploits his skill set, you know.
Unless he takes up the drums.
Yeah, well, let's get another drummer in there.
Jack, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I think you've given a very enticing perspective on the band, and I think people will really want to come and see the shows. And I'm certainly going to be there at the Palladium gig.
Oh, lovely. Okay.
So
I'll see you there.
Yeah, excellent, mate. So from the 29th of October through the 13th of November, King Crimson tour in the UK, and we're very much looking forward to it. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you.